Hello, my beautiful vintage Mike Tales family. I just want to pause and say how much I appreciate you, your time, your love, and your presence here mean more than words can express. Tonight's story is close to the heart. It's about Sylvester, a man who hides his wealth to find genuine love, and Helen, a woman standing at the edge of despair after betrayal. Together they remind us that even in our darkest moments, love has a way of finding us, healing us, and giving us new beginnings. So settle in, and let's journey together through this tale of love, redemption, and hope. The night was unusually quiet in Atlanta. The city lights sparkled in the distance, casting their glow over the Chattahoochee River as it moved lazily beneath the old iron bridge. The wind whispered along the railings, carrying with it a haunting chill. It was the kind of night where pain felt heavier, where loneliness pressed tighter, and where silence echoed louder than words. Helen stood at the edge of that bridge, her arms wrapped around her trembling body. The soft curls of her dark hair blew wildly across her tear-streaked face, and her eyes, once warm, full of laughter and hope, were now swollen, hollow, and lost. Her hands gripped the cold steel railing, her knuckles pale from the strain. She stared at the dark water below, her breath coming in shaky bursts. Everything had been taken from her, every ounce of sacrifice, every sleepless night working 2 jobs to build the life she dreamed of, gone. Her husband, the man she thought she could trust, had been nothing more than a parasite, hiding behind the mask of love. He stole her savings, her property, and her faith in humanity. Then, when she was left with nothing but despair, he vanished, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life shattered beyond repair. Why fight anymore? She whispered to herself, her voice cracking under the weight of despair. Why keep breathing when there's nothing left to breathe for? The wind carried her words away, but she heard them echo inside her mind, louder and louder like a cruel reminder. Her body swayed slightly as she leaned forward, the river calling her, promising peace. One step, one final choice. No more pain, no more betrayal, no more pretending she was strong, when inside she was already gone. "Don't," a voice said gently behind her. She froze, her heart lurching inside her chest. For a moment, she thought it was her mind playing tricks, but then she heard the footsteps, steady, slow, deliberate, approaching her. "Don't jump." Helen turned her head slightly, just enough to see the man standing a few feet away. His clothes were simple, worn jeans, a faded brown jacket, scuffed shoes that had seen better days. His hair was peppered with gray, neatly kept despite the simplicity of his appearance, and his face carried the marks of time and experience. He didn't look like a rescuer, not a policeman or a preacher, just a man with eyes so kind it unsettled her. "Stay where you are," Helen said quickly, her voice sharp, laced with panic. "I don't know who you are, but don't come closer." He lifted his hands, palms outward, showing he meant no harm. "I won't," he replied softly. His tone was calm, soothing, almost like a blanket draped over a shaking body. I couldn't walk by and say nothing." Helen looked back at the water, her chest rising and falling quickly. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've lost. Just keep walking." "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I don't know everything about you, but I know that whatever brought you here tonight, it must be unbearable. And I know what it's like to stand on the edge, wondering if the world would even notice if you were gone." Something in his words made her grip tighten on the railing. She turned her head more this time, studying him cautiously. You've been here before?" His gaze dropped for a moment, as if the memories weighed heavy on him. When he looked back up, his eyes glistened under the faint glow of the bridge's street lamps. 8 years ago I buried my wife. She was the only person who ever loved me without condition. The only person who saw me, not the success, not the money, not the expectations, just me. And when she died, I thought my life ended with her. I didn't want to go on. Every day felt like a punishment. I used to sit on bridges like this one, thinking maybe the river could wash away the emptiness. Helen's throat tightened, her tears falling freely now. His voice wasn't dramatic or pleading, it was raw, broken and honest, the kind of truth you couldn't fake. "What stopped you?" she asked, her voice trembling. He took a step closer, still careful, still respectful of the space between them. "I realized, if I let go, I'd never know if life still had something left for me. I'd never know if there was another reason to laugh, or another hand to hold, or another morning worth waking up for. I didn't believe it back then, but something inside whispered, "Not yet. Hold on a little longer." Helen closed her eyes, her lips quivering. "There's nothing left for me," she said. "He took it all. Everything I worked for, everything I believed in. He said he loved me, but it was all a lie. How do you come back from that? How do you learn to trust again when love itself feels like a trick?" The man's face softened, pain flickering in his eyes as though he understood too well. "You don't have to trust today. You don't have to heal tonight. But you can give yourself the chance to feel something tomorrow, something different than this. Betrayal doesn't get the last word. Helen, it doesn't define the rest of your story." Her eyes shot open, her heart pounding. How do you know my name?" He smiled faintly, almost shyly. "The diner down the street. You dropped your wallet a couple of days ago. The waitress was trying to call your name when you left. I picked it up, hoping to return it." He reached into his jacket pocket and slowly pulled out a worn leather wallet, holding it up. "I didn't mean to startle you." Helen blinked, a mixture of suspicion and shock clouding her mind. But the sight of her wallet, the little trinkets she kept inside, confirmed his words. He wasn't some stranger. Lurking in the shadows, he had been carrying a piece of her life, waiting for the right moment to give it back. "You've been holding on to it all this time?" she whispered. "I wanted to find the right moment," he admitted. "But tonight when I saw you here, I couldn't just walk away." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of the river below. Helen's grip on the railing loosened, her body trembling from exhaustion. She looked at the wallet in his hand, then back at his eyes, and something inside her, some faint, buried spark, shifted. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Sylvester," he replied. "Just Sylvester." Helen let out a shaky breath, half a laugh, half a sob. "You don't even know me, Sylvester. You don't know the mess I've become." He shook his head gently. "I don't need to know the whole story to see that you matter. Pain doesn't erase your worth. Loss doesn't erase the love you're still capable of giving and receiving. And even if you don't believe in yourself right now, let me believe in you. Just until you can." The words pierced through her defenses like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She felt her knees weaken, her chest tighten. She stepped back from the railing, her body trembling as the reality of what she almost did sank in. Sylvester moved carefully, closing the distance just enough to hold out his hand, not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. "Come with me, just for tonight. You don't have to decide anything about tomorrow or the rest of your life. Just let tonight be about surviving. Let me walk with you." Helen looked at his hand, then at his face. His eyes held no judgment, only a steady compassion that felt foreign, almost frightening. She hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. It was warm, firm, grounding. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't standing on the edge alone. As they walked away from the bridge, side by side, Helen glanced at him and whispered, "Why me? Why stop for me?" Sylvester's lips curved into a small bittersweet smile. "Because once upon a time someone stopped for me." And under the glow of the city lights, two broken souls took their first step away from despair, unknowingly beginning a journey that would change their lives forever. The morning after the bridge, Helen sat in her tiny one-bedroom apartment, staring at the untouched cup of coffee on the table. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. But inside her head there was only noise, memories of last night, the sound of the rushing river, Sylvester's voice pulling her back from the edge. She ran her hands over her face, trying to steady her breathing. She had been so close, too close, and yet here she was alive. She should have felt grateful, but instead, a strange mixture of confusion and fear swirled within her. Why did that man care? Why had his words made her step back when she had already decided she was done? Her phone buzzed on the table, startling her. She picked it up to see a text from an unknown number. "I just wanted to check in. This is Sylvester. You don't have to reply, but I hope you're okay today." Helen's chest tightened. He had found a way to reach her. She almost ignored it, almost tossed the phone aside. But something in her heart urged her to respond. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she finally typed back, "I'm still here. Thank you." Minutes passed, and then the reply came. That's all that matters today. Later that evening, Helen found herself at the diner Sylvester had mentioned. She hadn't planned on coming, her feet just carried her there as if her body knew what her heart needed before her mind did. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and frying bacon, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Sylvester was already there, seated at a booth by the window, a steaming mug in front of him. He looked up as she walked in, his lips curling into a soft smile that felt almost out of place in this noisy, ordinary setting. "You came," he said simply as she slid into the seat across from him. Helen shrugged, her eyes flicking toward the menu. "I guess I was curious." "Curious about me? About why you didn't just walk away last night," she said quietly. "Most people would have." Sylvester leaned back, studying her with those steady eyes of his. "Because I know what it feels like when no one shows up. When you're begging silently for someone to notice, and the world just keeps moving. I couldn't let you stand there alone." Helen swallowed hard, his words cutting into her heart like truth. She didn't want to hear but needed to. She nodded slowly, then reached for the glass of water the waitress had placed before her. They ate in silence for a while, Helen poking at her scrambled eggs, Sylvester quietly sipping his coffee. The silence wasn't awkward, though. It was heavy with things unsaid, with stories waiting to surface. Finally, Helen broke it. "I wasn't lying last night. He really did take everything. Years of saving, of working late shifts, of dreaming about finally owning something that was mine. Gone. I can't even look in the mirror without seeing the fool I was for believing in him." Sylvester's gaze softened. "You weren't a fool for loving someone. You were betrayed, and that says nothing about your worth. It says everything about his character." Helen scoffed bitterly, her eyes stinging. "Easy to say when you're not the one who has to start over from nothing." "You're right," he admitted, his voice low. "But I know what it's like to wake up every day and wonder how to keep living when the best part of your life is gone. My wife, she was everything to me. And when I lost her, I thought I had nothing left. But slowly, piece by piece, I realized the pain didn't erase the possibility of something new. Different, yes, but still beautiful." Helen's fork clattered onto her plate as she stared at him, stunned by the vulnerability in his words. "You talk like you still love her." "I do," Sylvester said without hesitation. "That love will never die, but it doesn't mean my heart can't find room for more." The way he said it, so earnest, so unafraid, made Helen's chest tighten. For a moment she forgot to breathe. Over the next few weeks they met at the diner often. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the rain outside. Sylvester never pushed, never pried. He simply showed up, steady and patient like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship. One rainy evening, Helen found herself confessing more than she ever thought she would. "Do you know what hurts the most? It's not losing the money. It's realizing that the man I shared my bed with, the man I thought had my back, was only waiting for the moment I was weak enough to steal everything. I loved him, Sylvester. I loved him so much it blinded me. And now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to love again." Sylvester reached across the table slowly, his hand resting near hers. He didn't touch her, not yet, but the warmth of his presence wrapped around her like a blanket. "Helen, scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you've survived. And maybe, just maybe, love the second time around doesn't blind you. Maybe it teaches you to see more clearly." Her eyes shimmered with tears, her throat tight as she whispered, "But what if I'm too afraid to try?" "Then let me be afraid with you," he said softly. "We don't have to rush. We don't even have to call it love yet. Just let me sit with you in the fear. Let me prove that not everyone leaves when it gets hard." The dam broke inside her, and she covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. Sylvester didn't move, didn't push. He simply stayed there, his presence steady, his silence louder than words. When she finally looked up, her cheeks wet and her chest aching, he gave her the smallest smile. "You're stronger than you think, Helen. You don't know me well enough to say that." "I know enough," he replied, his voice unwavering. "I know you're still here." One night, after another long evening at the diner, Sylvester walked her home. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of the lampposts. Helen pulled her coat tighter around her as the cool breeze brushed against her face. "Do you ever get tired of carrying other people's pain?" she asked suddenly. Sylvester chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It's not a burden. It's a gift to be trusted with it. And besides," Sometimes carrying someone else's pain makes my own feel lighter. Helen glanced at him, her lips parting as if to argue, but the sincerity in his voice silenced her. She looked away, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. As they reached her apartment building, they stopped at the steps. She hesitated, her hand resting on the railing. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Sylvester's eyes searched hers, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I couldn't, even if I wanted to." For a moment the air between them shifted, thick with something unspoken. Helen's chest rose and fell quickly, her lips parting as if waiting for him to close the distance. But Sylvester didn't. He stepped back, giving her space, giving her choice. "Good night, Helen," he said gently. She watched him walk away, her heart aching in a way that felt terrifyingly alive, and for the first time in years, as she turned the key to her door, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. Spring in Atlanta had a way of making the world look new again. The trees along Peachtree Street had begun to bloom. The air smelled faintly of magnolias, and the sidewalks bustled with life. But for Helen, each day still felt fragile, as if one wrong step could shatter the fragile hope she had begun to rebuild. She had grown close to Sylvester over the past few months. He was her anchor, the one person who showed up without fail, the one who made her believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone was out to break her. They spent evenings at the diner, long walks in the park, and quiet conversations that stretched late into the night. But there were cracks she couldn't ignore. The way he carried himself, for instance. Even in his worn clothes, there was a certain grace in the way he moved, as if he had been raised in rooms with chandeliers and polished marble floors. His hands, though calloused, bore the marks of someone who had once known softer lives, and the way people reacted to him, waitresses, store clerks, strangers, they seemed to sense something about him she couldn't quite place. One evening, it all came to light. Helen had invited Sylvester to a small art exhibition downtown. She had always loved art, even before her husband had drained her finances. Being surrounded by creativity reminded her that beauty could still rise from brokenness. The gallery was modest, but filled with elegance. Paintings lined the walls. The air buzzed with quiet conversations, and glasses of wine clinked softly. Helen wore a simple navy dress, her curls pinned back loosely. For the first time in a long while, she felt beautiful. Sylvester walked beside her in his usual attire, but something about his posture drew eyes. Heads turned as they entered, whispers floated, and Helen noticed the curator approach him almost immediately. "Mr. Whitmore," the curator greeted warmly, shaking his hand with enthusiasm. "It's been years since we've seen you here." Helen froze. Her gaze shot to Sylvester. "Whitmore," she whispered. Sylvester's jaw tightened, but he forced a polite smile. "It's good to be here." The curator beamed, oblivious to the storm brewing beside him. "Your contributions helped this gallery survive its toughest years. We're forever grateful. If you'd like, we have a private collection in the back. I'd be honored to show you." Helen's heart pounded. Contributions? Private collection? This didn't sound like the man who wore frayed jackets and spoke of scraping by. She stepped away, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "Sylvester! What is he talking about?" The curator blinked, finally realizing she wasn't in on the truth. Sylvester turned toward her, his expression pained. "Helen, please, not here." But it was too late. The whispers grew louder. People glanced their way, and Helen's chest felt like it was caving in. She turned on her heel and walked out of the gallery, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. Outside, the night air was cool, but Helen's skin burned with betrayal. She stopped near the curb, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if to hold back the pieces of her heart from falling apart. Sylvester rushed out after her. "Helen, wait." She spun to face him, her eyes blazing. "Who are you?" He froze, the question cutting deeper than any accusation. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I'm still me, Helen. I'm still the man who met you on that bridge. The man who listened to your pain, the man who—" "No!" she snapped, her voice trembling. "You lied. You let me believe you were struggling, that you were just a simple man trying to find his way. But you're not. You're him, a Whitmore, a billionaire." The word dripped with bitterness like poison on her tongue. Sylvester stepped closer, his hands outstretched, desperate. "I didn't lie about who I am inside. I only hid what I have, because what I have has ruined every chance I've ever had at real love. After my wife died, women saw me as a prize, not a person. They wanted the money, the lifestyle, the name. Not me, his voice broke. I couldn't risk that again. I needed to know if someone could love me for what's here. He pressed his hand against his chest. Not for what's in my bank account. Helen shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Do you even hear yourself? You tested me, just like he did. Do you know what it feels like to be deceived by someone you trusted? To pour your heart into a lie? Her voice cracked with anguish. I thought you were different, Sylvester. I thought you were the one man who wouldn't make me feel like a fool. Her words sliced through him like a blade. He closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her pain. I never wanted to hurt you, Helen, I swear. I only wanted to protect what we were building until I knew it was real. And now, she whispered, her voice hoarse, now that I know what's left of it. The silence between them was deafening. Cars passed by, their headlights briefly illuminating two broken figures on the sidewalk. Sylvester's voice trembled. What's left is the truth. I love you, Helen. Not as a game, not as a test, but with everything in me. You saved me that night on the bridge as much as I saved you. You reminded me that my heart could still feel. Please, don't let this be the end. Helen's tears fell freely now, her chest rising and falling in jagged breaths. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the wounds of betrayal were still fresh, and the thought of being deceived again was unbearable. I need time, she whispered, stepping back. I can't do this right now. I can't breathe. Sylvester's hand dropped to his side. His eyes filled with a sorrow so deep, it made her want to collapse into his arms. But she didn't. She turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. That night, Helen lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was silent, but her mind screamed. She replayed every moment with him, the diner conversations, the laughter, the comfort of his presence. None of it had been fake. She knew that. But the lie of omission, the mask he had worn, made her feel raw all over again. And yet, when he said he loved her, she had felt it, in her bones, in the trembling of her heart, in the ache of wanting to believe him. 2 days later, there was a knock at her door. She considered ignoring it, but something pulled her to open it. Sylvester stood there, not in disguise this time. He wore a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes carried the same gentle sorrow she had always seen. I had to come, he said quietly. Helen crossed her arms, her defenses high. Why, to show me the real you? Or the version you think I deserve to see? He shook his head. To tell you that I'm done hiding. No more masks, no more pretending. If you can't forgive me, I'll walk away. But if you can, if you're willing to try, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that my love for you has nothing to do with money. Helen's throat tightened, her resolve wavering. His voice wasn't polished now. It was cracked, desperate, human. She whispered, barely audible. And what if I can't trust you? Sylvester's eyes glistened. Then let me earn it back, one day at a time. The silence stretched. Finally, Helen exhaled shakily, a tear slipping down her cheek. You make it so hard to hate you. Sylvester's lips trembled with a faint, hopeful smile. Then maybe there's still hope. For the first time since the truth had shattered her, Helen let him step inside. The weeks that followed were a slow dance between hurt and healing. Helen didn't forgive Sylvester overnight. Trust once shattered didn't mend in a day. But he showed up just as he had promised. Every morning, a gentle text. I hope today is kind to you. Every evening, a phone call not filled with demands but with listening. And in between, small acts of thoughtfulness, flowers left at her door, books she had once mentioned wanting to read. A note slipped into her mailbox with just 5 words. You are not alone anymore. Helen wrestled with her feelings daily. Part of her wanted to push him away, to shield herself from the risk of another heartbreak. But another part, the part that remembered the bridge, that remembered the warmth in his eyes and the steady way he held her hand, longed to believe him, longed to fall not into despair this time, but into love. One evening they met again at the bridge, the same place where their stories had first collided. The night was quiet, the river reflecting the glow of the city lights above. Sylvester stood beside her, his hands tucked in his pockets. He wasn't in a suit tonight, just a simple shirt and jacket. as if to remind her of the man she first met. "Why here?" Helen asked softly, her eyes scanning the water below. "Because this is where I almost lost you," he said, "and where I found you. It feels right to come back, not to erase that night, but to honor it, to say, this is where our pain met, but it doesn't have to be where it ends." Helen's throat tightened. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe you. I want to believe in us. But I'm still scared." Sylvester stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Then let me be scared with you. Love isn't about never being afraid, Helen. It's about choosing each other despite the fear." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "And what if I'm not enough? What if I can't be what you need?" He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "You are already more than enough. You've given me something I thought I'd never find again. A reason to feel alive. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. That's all I'll ever need." The walls inside her finally crumbled. She leaned into him, her lips trembling as they met his. The kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. It was tender, slow, filled with all the words they hadn't yet spoken. It was a promise. Months passed and their love grew stronger with every shared laugh, every late-night conversation, every quiet moment where no words were needed. Helen began to rebuild her life with Sylvester by her side. With his encouragement, she reopened her small design business, something she had once abandoned after her husband's betrayal. Sylvester became her biggest cheerleader, investing not in her business but in her dreams, reminding her daily of her worth. One autumn evening, Sylvester invited her to the gardens of a historic estate on the outskirts of Atlanta. The air was crisp, the leaves painted in shades of gold and crimson, the pathways lit by soft lanterns. Helen walked beside him, unaware of what was to come. As they reached the heart of the garden, she gasped. Strings of fairy lights hung above them, glowing softly against the night sky. In the center stood a small wooden arch, adorned with white roses and ivy. Sylvester turned to her, his hands trembling slightly as he held hers. His eyes, though filled with nerves, shone with a love that steadied his voice. "Helen, the night I met you, you were ready to end your story, and I was ready to keep living mine in the shadows of the past. But then you happened. You pulled me out of grief, out of loneliness, and showed me that love can be born again, even in broken hearts. I can't promise you a life without challenges, but I can promise that you'll never face them alone. I love you, Helen, with everything I am, with everything I have. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Helen's face as she covered her mouth, her heart pounding. She had once thought love was a trick, a lie dressed in promises. But here, standing before Sylvester, she knew the truth. This was real. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Sylvester slipped the ring onto her finger, and when their lips met, the garden erupted in applause from the small circle of friends he had invited to witness their moment. Their wedding was intimate, just as they both wanted. Not a display of wealth, but a celebration of love. Helen wore a simple ivory gown, her curls cascading around her shoulders, while Sylvester looked at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They exchanged vows under the arch of roses, promising not perfection, but honesty, forgiveness, and forever choosing each other. As they kissed, sealing their union, Helen whispered against his lips, "You've given me back my life, and you've given me back my heart." Sylvester replied, his voice breaking with emotion. A year later, Helen held their newborn daughter in her arms. The hospital room was quiet. The world narrowed down to the tiny life nestled against her chest. Tears of joy streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "She's perfect." Sylvester leaned over, his hand resting gently on the baby's head. His eyes shimmered with tears as he kissed Helen's forehead. "She's the proof," he murmured. Helen looked up at him, confused. "Proof of what?" "That love can be reborn," he said softly. "That even after loss, even after betrayal, life can give you a second chance. You're my second chance, Helen, and she's our forever." Helen's heart swelled with emotion, her soul overwhelmed by the love she never thought she'd find again. She closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of her daughter's skin, and whispered, "I'm glad I stayed." Sylvester pulled her into his arms, holding both her and their daughter close. "So am I. Every day for the rest of my life I'll be glad you stayed." Months later, the three of them walked hand in hand across the very bridge where it had all begun. The river still flowed beneath them, The wind still whispered across the steel. But everything was different now. Helen paused, looking out at the water. Her daughter's small hand clutched her finger tightly, grounding her in the present. She turned to Sylvester, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day," he admitted. "Not with fear anymore, but with gratitude. Because that night didn't end us, it began us." Helen leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "And yet," he said, kissing the top of her head, "it feels like it led us right here." They stood there for a moment, a family framed by the glow of the city lights, no longer broken souls but healed hearts bound forever. And as the river flowed beneath them, carrying away the pain of yesterday, Helen realized the truth. Love had not only found her again, it had saved her forever. And that brings us to the end of this beautiful journey. I hope Sylvester and Helen's story touched your heart the way it touched mine. A reminder that even after pain and loss, true love can find us again and light the way forward. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. And most of all, thank you for being part of this family. Until the next tale, keep believing in love. Keep holding on to hope and never forget, you are deeply appreciated. Vintage Mike Tales.